Hello, this is a useful chemistry practical podcast that aims to help all first year students with their practicals and more specifically with experiment 102 thin layer chromatography.
Before moving on to the method, do not breathe the vapours of toluene, nor swallow any dichloromethane as it can cause drowsiness and is carcinogenic respectively.
The first part of this experiment is to examine three compounds: toluene, dichloromethane, which had been mentioned before, and ethyl acetate. Now be aware not to touch the front of the plates, only with tweezers or with your fingers by the edge. Use a pencil to draw a horizontal line 8 mm from one end of the plate and 2 marks on the line approximately 8 mm apart from each edge. With the help of the capillary droppers, carefully add 2 small spots of differing intensities, one to each mark. This process must be done to each of the compounds.
Place the TLC plate into the fume hood and then fill a developing jar with the first solvent, which happens to be toluene, but make sure that the solvent level is below the level of the spots on the plate. Place the TLC plate in the jar and wait until the solvent is 3/4 of the way up the plate. Make sure to cover the jar with the lid beforehand and do not move the developing jar with the TLC plate still inside it. Remove the plate when the solvent is almost at the top of it, and after taking the plate out, immediately mark the solvent frontward before it evaporates. Follow the same steps for the other 2 solvents.
At this point, I would like to add some tips that I would have found useful before attending 102 practical. Basically, after part A, you take some time to copy the TLC plate onto the duplicate notebook and calculate the RF of each spot, as well as measure their distance from 0 point and then position. Practice the calculation of the RF before the experiment, just so you'll have the knowledge to do it right away in the labs, and don't waste any time. And great help would be the thin layer chromatography RF measurement simulation that you all can find in your Blackboard on 102 experiment. Also, something I will again mention at the end of this podcast as it concerns the proforma is that having downloaded the ChemDraw before would have been a lot more helpful, as it took ages to get downloaded.
Moving on to the second part, repeat the process of part A, but instead when you take the TLC plate from the jar, you make sure to mark the solvent front, and then once it is dried off, you can proceed with the examination of the TLC plate under UV light. Then you mark the spots, then once again you copy everything into the duplicate notebook, calculate the RF values, and you're set off for the last part.
Last but not least, part C. In this one, you will work in a pair and gloves are necessary. Your demonstrator will give you a brief explanation and hand you a tablet. Make sure you ask the name of the tablet, as it is questioned later on in the performer. Using a clean mortar and pestle, crush the tablet until it turns into a fine powder. While in the fume hood, with the help of a spatula, transfer as much as possible of the product to a test tube, and then add concentrated ammonia solution and dichloromethane, approximately 3 ml of each. You can either use a glass rod to mix the test tube or swirl it very well and wait a bit for the layers to set. Use a long pasture pipette to transfer the dichloromethane, the lowest layer, into a smaller test tube. Just be aware that if the sample remains cloudy, call your demonstrator for assistance.
Analyse now by adding 1 drop of it to the TLC plate together with a drop of an authentic sample of caffeine, which will be given to you by your demonstrator in the lab. The next step should be clear to you by now, and make sure to use methanol as your new solvent. Follow the steps from part A and you are done.
About the proforma, first thing you have to do is have ChemDraw downloaded so you can draw the TLC plates. For part A, all you have to do is write down your calculated RFs of each spot, attach your first 3 TLC plates, and comment on some basic questions about the polarity of each solvent. For part B, you are asked to draw the structures of each solvent you used, as well as the TLC plate and its calculated RFs. Finally, for part C, same as above, copy down the calculated RF of caffeine and draw structures of what's asked, as well as the equation for the reaction.
That's it for Practical 102. Hope you found it helpful.